Some cars were built to change the game, but instead they vanished without a trace. Were they too powerful, too dangerous, or did someone want them gone? These 12 American machines were wiped from history, leaving behind only whispers and rumors. But today, their secrets are finally being uncovered. In the early 1960s, Ford was on the brink of revolutionizing motorsports, determined to dethrone Ferrari at Le Mans. Most people know the story of the Ford GT40, the car that took on Enzo Ferrari and won. But what few remember is that before the GT40, there was another secret project, a car that could have been America's first true mid-engine supercar, the 1965 Ford GT70. Designed in secrecy as an experimental endurance racer, the GT70 was built with one purpose: to dominate international motorsports. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Ford erased almost every trace of its existence, leaving behind nothing but rumors, a few scattered blueprints, and unanswered questions about whether any examples still exist today. The story of the GT70 begins in 1963 when Ford executives, humiliated by Enzo Ferrari's last-minute refusal to sell his company to them, declared all-out war on the prancing horse. The directive was clear: build a car that could beat Ferrari at its own game. But before the GT40 project took center stage, Ford was quietly developing another contender, one that was perhaps even more radical. The GT70 was a sleek, low-slung machine with advanced aerodynamics and a lightweight chassis designed for high-speed endurance racing. It was smaller than what would become the GT40, with a more compact wheelbase and aggressive styling that looked decades ahead of its time. Some within Ford believed it could be the perfect Ferrari killer, a car that could achieve Ford's Le Mans dream before the GT40 even turned a wheel in competition. Under the rear deck sat a high-revving 289 cubic-inch Ford V8, the same engine that would later power the first GT40s. Paired with a 5-speed ZF transaxle and cutting-edge independent suspension, the GT70 had all the makings of a world-class endurance racer. The car's weight was kept to an absolute minimum, using lightweight aluminum panels and a tubular space frame chassis, making it one of the lightest prototypes Ford had ever built. Engineers estimated that with its power-to-weight ratio, the GT70 could have exceeded 200 mph down the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans, putting it right in the fight with Ferrari's 250p prototypes. Testing of the GT70 was conducted in absolute secrecy at Ford's private facilities, and early results were promising. The car's aerodynamics were highly effective, and its mid-engine layout provided excellent handling balance. It was a serious contender, a machine that could have changed the course of motorsport history. But just as the GT70 was beginning to take shape, a shift in Ford's racing strategy sealed its fate. The company's executives, led by Henry Ford II and racing mastermind John Wyer, decided to throw their full support behind a larger, more European-influenced design, the car that would become the GT40. The GT70, despite its potential, was suddenly viewed as redundant. Without warning, the GT70 project was shut down. Ford ordered the destruction of most of the prototypes, effectively erasing the car from official records. It never had the chance to compete, never turned a lap at Le Mans, and never got to prove itself on the world stage. Some sources suggest that only a handful of test mules were built, and only a select few people at Ford ever got to see them in action. But the story doesn't quite end there. Over the years, whispers have circulated among collectors and historians that at least one GT70 chassis may have escaped Ford's purge. Some believe that a prototype was secretly stored away in a warehouse, hidden from corporate destruction. Others claim that a Ford engineer managed to salvage key components before the program was axed. Unlike the GT40, which became a legend, the GT70 faded into obscurity, its existence reduced to a footnote in racing history. If a GT70 still exists today, it would be one of the rarest and most significant lost supercars of all time, a missing link between Ford's early endurance racing experiments and the legendary GT40. But until someone unearths proof, the GT70 remains an enigma, a ghost of what could have been. It was America's forgotten supercar, a car that had the potential to change history, only to be buried before the world ever got the chance to see it. By the early 1970s, the muscle car era was beginning to wane. Rising insurance costs, looming emissions regulations, and a shifting market made high-performance cars less practical for mainstream buyers. But Pontiac, always the rebellious brand within GM, wasn't ready to surrender just yet. They had one last trick up their sleeve, a car that could have redefined American performance sedans. The 1972 Pontiac Grand Am 455 Super Duty. It was a bold attempt to blend the luxury of the Grand Prix, the aggressive styling of the GTO, and the raw power of the legendary Super Duty 455 engine. It had all the makings of a four-door muscle car revolution, a machine that could have rewritten the rules of performance sedans long before the likes of the BMW M5 or Dodge Charger SRT. But before it could hit the streets, corporate politics sealed its fate, and the ultimate muscle sedan was erased before the public even knew it existed. The idea behind the Grand Am 455 SD was simple. Take Pontiac's newly introduced Grand Am, a stylish and well-equipped mid-size luxury sedan, and inject it with the heart of a true muscle car. At its core would be the Super Duty 455, an engine that Pontiac engineers had painstakingly developed to be the last great American high-performance V8 before emissions laws strangled horsepower. Rated conservatively at 310 horsepower, but capable of much more in the right hands, the SD 455 was a brute, featuring reinforced internals, a radical camshaft, oversized ports, and a high-flow exhaust system. It was a race-bred powerhouse that, when paired with the Grand Am's sleek, European-inspired design and road-tuned suspension, would have made for a genuine Autobahn-storming American sports sedan. Development of the car was well underway by late 1971, with Pontiac testing prototypes outfitted with the SD 455, high-performance suspension upgrades, and aggressive styling cues borrowed from the GTO and Firebird Trans Am. The engineers envisioned a car that could offer both high-speed cruising and backroad capability, a muscle car that didn't need to sacrifice comfort or refinement. Pontiac even planned to offer both four-door and two-door versions, making it a direct competitor to high-performance European sedans of the era. But just as the project was gaining momentum, GM's corporate overlords intervened. In the early 1970s, General Motors had implemented a series of restrictive policies aimed at toning down performance vehicles in response to rising insurance rates and government pressure. One of the strictest rules was the ban on high-output engines in mid-size sedans, a rule that specifically targeted Pontiac's ambitious plans for the Grand Am 455 SD. Despite protests from Pontiac's engineering team, GM executives refused to approve the car for production, citing concerns over emissions compliance, insurance liability, and marketing conflicts with the Firebird Trans Am. In a final attempt to save the project, Pontiac built a handful of fully operational Grand Am 455 SD prototypes and sent them out for real-world testing. These cars, equipped with the full Super Duty package, reportedly delivered astonishing performance, rivaling some of the fastest muscle cars of the time. But it was all for nothing. The corporate decision was final. The Grand Am 455 SD would not see the light of day. Orders were given to dismantle the prototypes, and most of the evidence of their existence was erased. Some sources claim that a few test mules were quietly converted back to standard Grand Ams and sold off as regular production models, but no officially documented SD 455 powered Grand Am has ever surfaced. The cancellation of the Grand Am 455 SD marked a turning point in Pontiac's performance legacy. It was a sign of things to come as muscle cars gave way to more restrained, emissions-friendly vehicles. Yet, had it been allowed to enter production, the Grand Am 455 SD could have set a new precedent for American performance sedans, one that Pontiac itself would not revisit until the G8 in the late 2000s. Today, the Grand Am 455 SD exists only as a ghost, a car that could have changed the landscape of American muscle but was stopped before it even had a chance to prove itself. What if Pontiac had been given the green light? Could the idea of a high-performance, full-size muscle sedan have caught on decades earlier? Would Pontiac have created an American answer to BMW's M cars long before they became the gold standard for sports sedans? These are the questions that make the Grand Am 455 SD one of the greatest what-if stories in automotive history. By the early 1980s, Dodge was still trying to shake off the reputation of being just another economy car brand under Chrysler's struggling umbrella. Performance had taken a backseat to fuel efficiency in the wake of the 1970s oil crisis, and the golden age of American muscle cars seemed like a distant memory. But deep inside Chrysler's Skunk Works division, something radical was taking shape, an engineering experiment so advanced that it could have redefined Dodge's image overnight. That project was the Dodge Turbo M4S, a sleek, futuristic, mid-engine supercar capable of reaching speeds that few production cars of the time could match. Born out of a partnership between Chrysler and PPG Industries, the M4S, short for Mid-Engine Four-Cylinder Sports, was designed as a pace car for the PPG IndyCar World Series. But this was no ordinary show car. Unlike most pace cars, which were little more than flashy graphics on a standard production vehicle, the M4S was a full-blown prototype built with cutting-edge materials and race-inspired engineering. Its body was crafted from lightweight composite materials, featuring a low-slung aerodynamic shape that looked like it had been lifted straight from a sci-fi movie. And under the rear deck lid sat something truly unexpected, a turbocharged engine that gave this Dodge a level of performance almost unheard of at the time. The heart of the M4S was a 2.2-liter twin-turbocharged four-cylinder developed by Chrysler in collaboration with Cosworth. But don't let the small displacement fool you. This wasn't your average Dodge Omni engine. Featuring advanced fuel injection, a custom intercooler system, and a sophisticated tuning package, this power plant cranked out an astonishing 440 horsepower. That may not sound like much compared to today's supercars, but in 1980, that was Ferrari and Lamborghini territory. Paired with a 5-speed manual transmission and a rear-wheel drive layout, the M4S was rumored to have a top speed of 200 mph, a figure that would have made it one of the fastest road-legal cars in the world. Testing at Chrysler's proving grounds confirmed that the M4S was a monster. It accelerated from 0 to 60 mph in just 4.1 seconds. And independent tests suggested it could indeed crack the 200 mph barrier on a long enough straight. That was faster than a Ferrari 512 BB, faster than a Lamborghini Countach, and faster than any American production car of the era. It was a Dodge that could humiliate the best supercars of Europe. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, the M4S disappeared. Despite its jaw-dropping capabilities, Dodge never moved forward with a production version. There were plenty of reasons why. Cost was a major factor, as the M4S used exotic materials and an engine that would have required significant re-engineering for mass production. Chrysler was also in financial turmoil at the time, desperately trying to keep itself afloat with government loans and focusing on more practical cars like the K car and the minivan. A 200 mph supercar, no matter how impressive, simply didn't fit into Dodge's survival strategy. So instead of making history as America's answer to Ferrari, the M4S was locked away. Chrysler kept the car hidden, its high-speed tests and performance figures known only to a handful of engineers. Most people had no idea such a machine had ever been built, until Hollywood came calling. In 1986, a modified version of the M4S was used as the hero car in the cult film The Wraith, starring Charlie Sheen. The film depicted the M4S as a mysterious, otherworldly machine, a supernatural avenger tearing through the desert highways and leaving lesser cars in the dust. The car's eerie, futuristic design and blistering speed turned it into a legend among movie car enthusiasts. But while several stunt replicas were built for filming, the real M4S remained hidden, never making an appearance outside of Chrysler's archives. Today, the original M4S still exists, preserved in a museum, but Dodge has never revisited the idea of a mid-engine supercar. Had history played out differently, the M4S could have been America's answer to the Porsche 959 or Ferrari F40, an engineering masterpiece proving that Dodge could build something truly world-class. But instead, it remains a ghost of what could have been, a forgotten piece of automotive history that only came to life on the silver screen. By the late 1950s, American automakers were engaged in an all-out horsepower war. Chevrolet had just introduced its fuel-injected small-block Corvette. Ford was experimenting with superchargers on its Thunderbirds. And Chrysler, already known for its forward-thinking engineering, was developing a high-performance vehicle that could have set the stage for the muscle car movement years before the Pontiac GTO. That vehicle was the 1957 DeSoto Adventurer Supercharged, a car that, had it reached production, could have changed the trajectory of performance cars in America. Instead, it became one of the great automotive mysteries, whispered about by collectors, searched for by historians, and ultimately erased by the very company that created it. To understand why DeSoto, a mid-tier Chrysler brand better known for comfortable cruisers, was even considering such a high-performance vehicle, one must look at the broader context of the late 1950s. The DeSoto brand, introduced in 1928, had always been a step above Dodge, but just below Chrysler. By the mid-1950s, however, it was struggling to maintain an identity. Meanwhile, the horsepower race was heating up. Chevrolet had begun pushing high-performance versions of the Corvette, and Ford was marketing more powerful versions of the Thunderbird, while Chrysler itself was building a reputation for brute force with its luxurious but thunderous 300 series. DeSoto needed something to stand out, something that it would give it an identity as more than just an intermediate luxury brand. Enter the Adventurer. First introduced in 1956, the Adventurer was DeSoto's answer to the Chrysler 300, a high-performance, luxury-oriented model that packed a serious punch. Equipped with a 341 cubic inch Hemi V8 producing 320 horsepower, a massive figure at the time, it was already one of the most powerful cars on the road. But in 1957, Chrysler engineers wanted to push things further, and the Adventurer was chosen as the testbed for something truly radical: a factory-installed, belt-driven supercharger mounted to its Hemi engine. This was no ordinary power upgrade. The engine, now enlarged to 345 cubic inches, was fitted with a McCulloch supercharger, a centrifugal unit that provided forced induction at high RPMs, delivering an additional 50 to 75 horsepower over the standard dual-quad carbureted setup. Some sources suggest that final output figures may have reached as high as 400 horsepower, an absurd number for a production car in 1957. If true, this would have made the Adventurer the most powerful American car of its time, surpassing even Chrysler's own 300C, which topped out at 375 horsepower. But power was only part of the equation. To handle the extra speed, the supercharged Adventurer was given several critical upgrades. The chassis was reinforced to accommodate the added torque, the suspension was stiffened for better handling, and larger drum brakes were fitted to ensure it could stop as well as it could accelerate. The car also received subtle but purposeful aerodynamic enhancements, including a slightly lower ride height and a revised grille designed to improve airflow. Even the gold trim and signature DeSoto tail fins remained, creating a striking balance between elegance and aggression. The testing phase proved what Chrysler engineers already suspected. The supercharged Adventurer was brutally fast. In controlled runs at Chrysler's proving grounds, the car reportedly reached top speeds of over 140 mph, rivaling the best European Grand Tourers of the era. It could accelerate from 0 to 60 mph in under 7 seconds, an astonishing feat at a time when most family sedans struggled to do it in under 12. In an era dominated by heavy, underpowered land yachts, this was a game changer. It was faster than the Corvette, faster than the Thunderbird, and more powerful than anything else available to the public. It should have been a sensation. But just as the supercharged Adventurer was nearing production approval, the project was suddenly canceled. Chrysler's executives, already concerned about the shrinking market share of the DeSoto brand, feared that a high-performance model would not only fail to find buyers, but would also steal sales from the more profitable Chrysler 300 series. Insurance companies were also beginning to take notice of factory hot rods, and there were concerns that cars like this would be labeled as too dangerous for the average buyer. More importantly, there was an internal struggle at Chrysler over the future of DeSoto itself. By the late 1950s, the brand was losing its place in the company's hierarchy, squeezed between Dodge's aggressive performance push and Chrysler's premium market dominance. With these factors in mind, Chrysler made a brutal decision. The supercharged Adventurer project was terminated. Most of the prototypes were allegedly destroyed, along with official documentation about their existence. Chrysler's attention turned elsewhere. By 1969, NASCAR's aero wars were in full swing, with manufacturers pushing the limits of speed and aerodynamics in a bid to dominate the high-speed superspeedways of Daytona and Talladega. Chrysler had already made waves with the sleek, wind-cheating Dodge Charger 500, and its even more radical successors, the Charger, Daytona, and Plymouth Superbird, were about to change the game entirely. But Ford and Mercury weren't about to back down. Their weapon of choice was the Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2, a long-nosed, purpose-built stock car engineered to slice through the air with less drag and greater downforce than its competitors. The most famous of these was the Cale Yarborough Special, named after the aggressive and fearless NASCAR driver. On paper, the Spoiler 2 had everything it needed to take the fight to Dodge and Plymouth. It was based on the Mercury Cyclone Fastback, but featured an extended, more aerodynamically refined front end that made it slipperier at high speeds. The nose was stretched by nearly 6 inches, reshaped for better airflow, and integrated with a flush-mounted grille that significantly reduced drag. The body itself was subtly reworked, with a raked stance and smoothed-out lines, allowing it to cut through the wind more efficiently than its standard Cyclone counterpart. Under the hood, the Spoiler 2 packed serious firepower. Most were equipped with Ford's formidable 351 Windsor V8, but a select few were rumored to have been fitted with the legendary 428 Cobra jet, producing well over 400 horsepower. Some insiders even claim that a handful of competition-prepped versions were outfitted with the fearsome Boss 429, Ford's ultimate racing engine at the time. Regardless of the power plant, the Spoiler 2 was built to do one thing: win on Sunday, sell on Monday. But before Ford and Mercury could unleash their new NASCAR terror, the project ran into a major roadblock. In 1969, NASCAR required manufacturers to build at least 500 street-legal versions of their race cars for homologation purposes. Dodge and Plymouth met this requirement with the Daytona and Superbird, producing just enough to satisfy the rules while sneaking some onto dealership lots. Ford, on the other hand, had different priorities. The Blue Oval had already been investing heavily in its own aerodynamic NASCAR effort with the Ford Torino Talladega, which used many of the same wind tunnel tricks as the Cyclone Spoiler 2. While both cars were meant to work together, Ford's executives ultimately decided that the Torino program was the more viable choice for mass production. As a result, the Spoiler 2 program was quietly cut short. Just enough were built to technically satisfy NASCAR regulations. Reports suggest between 503 and 518 examples were completed, but many of them never made it to the public. Unlike the Dodge Daytona and Plymouth Superbird, which were at least sold in small numbers to customers, even if dealers struggled to move them off the lot, most of the Cyclone Spoiler suites were either repurposed for racing use or simply scrapped. Ford's decision to prioritize the Torino Talladega meant that Mercury's homologation car was effectively abandoned. Some ended up in the hands of private teams or employees, but many were crushed, leaving only a small handful to survive the purge. The result? Today, the Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2 Cale Yarborough Special is one of the rarest muscle cars in existence. While Daytona and Superbird values have skyrocketed due to their legendary status, the Spoiler 2 remains a forgotten relic of NASCAR's most exciting era. Those who do own one hold a piece of racing history that was never meant to be remembered, a car built to dominate the high banks of Daytona before being erased from Ford's corporate memory. Had Mercury's Spoiler 2 been given the same chance as its Mopar rivals, it might have become a legendary street machine in its own right. Instead, it remains a ghost from the Aero Wars, a car that was built for battle but denied its moment of glory. Somewhere out there, in dusty garages and forgotten collections, a few still exist. Silent reminders of a time when speed was everything and the race to be the fastest ruled Detroit. In the late 1970s, as muscle cars were being strangled by the dual forces of rising emissions regulations and skyrocketing insurance premiums, Chevrolet secretly dared to push the envelope once again. At a time when horsepower figures had dramatically dropped and the world seemed to have resigned itself to smaller engines and more pedestrian performance, a group of engineers at GM had a daring vision for the future, a vision that would have propelled the Corvette into a realm of performance that was decades ahead of its time. This vision took the form of a Corvette with a twin-turbocharged 427 cubic inch big block V8 engine, an astonishing idea when the performance world was still struggling to adapt to the realities of the 1970s. The legendary 427 engine had already proven itself as a true powerhouse, with a reputation that stretched back to the high-performance Corvettes of the 1960s and the dominance it showed in Can-Am racing. But this new iteration wasn't just another big block V8. This was a completely reimagined version, designed to deliver an immense, reliable, and controllable power output, one that would easily surpass the 600 horsepower barrier. A twin-turbo setup would provide forced induction to this already mighty engine, allowing it to breathe more air and make more power than anyone thought possible for a Corvette of that era. The numbers were staggering, over 600 horsepower on tap, a figure far beyond what any production car could achieve at the time. To achieve this ambitious goal, Chevrolet's engineers meticulously crafted a custom turbocharging system that was almost unheard of in the American performance car scene. The twin turbos were seamlessly integrated into the 427, with every component engineered to handle immense boost pressure. The engine also featured high-flow fuel injection, special pistons, and strengthened components designed to withstand the high forces produced by forced induction. The result was an engine that could send this mid-engine beauty flying down the straightaways, knocking the socks off anything on the road, and potentially anyone on the racetrack. The prototype Corvette, which was being secretly tested behind closed doors, was far ahead of its time. The car, still in its early stages of development, was everything the Corvette was known for, but taken to the extreme. It was aggressive, raw, and built with a single purpose: speed. In its earliest testing, the prototype reportedly shattered the performance figures of every car that had come before it. Test drivers marveled at the sheer acceleration, with the car allegedly capable of breaking the 200 mph mark with ease. In an era when most production Corvettes were barely scraping past 200 horsepower, this twin-turbocharged beast was already making 600 horsepower, leaving every other muscle car from the period in the dust. But even as the car was being tested, and with GM engineers fully aware of how close they were to producing an American supercar, the reality of the era began to rear its ugly head. The late 1970s were a time of severe change in the American automotive landscape. The government had just begun to crack down hard on emissions, and strict fuel efficiency standards were being implemented. Insurance companies were clamping down on high-performance cars, increasing premiums, and making it financially prohibitive to own such machines. Meanwhile, the performance landscape was shifting from pure muscle to more refined, fuel-efficient sports cars. The world simply wasn't ready for a 600-horsepower Corvette. Faced with these pressures, GM executives made the fateful decision to halt the project. The twin-turbo 427 Corvette would not see the light of day. For fear of backlash from government regulators and concerns about the increasing cost of production for a high-performance vehicle that would have only appealed to a limited market, GM chose to bury the project. The prototypes that had been built were destroyed, completely erased from GM's history books, leaving only a few whispered anecdotes from engineers who were lucky enough to witness the car's testing. The car was never shown to the public, never unveiled at an auto show, and never featured in GM marketing materials. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. While the decision to shelve the project may have made sense for the company at the time, it remains one of the most frustrating what-if stories in automotive history. This Corvette could have been the first true American supercar, far ahead of its time, and poised to challenge the likes of Ferrari, Porsche, and Lamborghini on the world stage. It could have given Chevrolet an unmatched reputation for performance, breaking the barriers of what was possible in the 1970s. Instead, it was lost to history, along with the few prototypes that existed. Today, all that remains of the twin-turbo 427 Corvette is the legend. There are no surviving photos of it. In the early 1950s, Packard was a company at a crossroads. Once a leading name in American luxury automobiles, Packard had become increasingly overshadowed by its competitors, notably Cadillac and Lincoln, who were securing their places at the top of the luxury market. Meanwhile, a seismic shift was occurring in the automotive world. With a growing interest in high-performance cars and the emergence of the Corvette, an American icon that promised to change the way Americans viewed sports cars. Packard, known for its refined luxury vehicles, was faced with a tough decision: either stick to its luxury roots or take a bold leap into the performance car market. In a moment of ambition, they chose to do both, and the result was the 1953 Packard Panther, a prototype car that could have reshaped the course of automotive history. The Panther was conceived as an experimental model meant to compete with the likes of the Chevrolet Corvette, which had quickly captured the public's attention with its sleek lines and sporting performance. At a time when fiberglass was still a relatively new material for mass-production automobiles, Packard saw an opportunity to make use of this light, durable substance to create a sports car that could be both nimble and powerful. The decision to use fiberglass was not just about weight savings. It was also an attempt to capture the futuristic, cutting-edge appeal that fiberglass offered. The Panther's body, with its smooth curves and angular design, looked more like a spaceship than a traditional car. Its aerodynamic profile, low stance, and aggressive lines made it clear that Packard wasn't just building a car to compete with the status quo. They were aiming to build something that would stand out as an icon of mid-century American automotive design. Under the hood, the Panther was powered by a V8 engine, a powerful and robust choice for a car of its size and weight. Although the exact specifications of the engine remain shrouded in mystery, reports suggest it was capable of producing more than enough horsepower to make the Panther a formidable competitor in the sports car realm. With its lightweight fiberglass construction and potent V8 engine, the Panther had the potential to be an incredibly fast and responsive machine, rivaling the performance capabilities of the Chevrolet Corvette and perhaps even surpassing it. Its design was ahead of its time, and it could have very well positioned Packard as a legitimate competitor in the sports car arena, something that seemed impossible for a company traditionally known for its luxury sedans. But the road to success was not smooth for the Packard. Packard, already struggling with financial difficulties, found itself in a precarious position. Despite the Panther's exciting design and performance potential, the company was burdened by mounting financial challenges and an inability to keep pace with its competitors. In the early 1950s, Packard was not in a position to build a car that would require substantial investment in production and marketing. The company's efforts to introduce the Panther were compromised by its ongoing struggles in the luxury market. They were simply unable to afford the investment required to bring the car to mass production, and as a result, the project was quietly shelved. In total, only a handful of prototypes were built. These cars, which could have been the start of something groundbreaking for Packard, were largely abandoned. Packard, unable to follow through with the Panther's production, also struggled with its broader identity as a luxury car manufacturer. Instead of continuing to push forward with an ambitious sports car, the company retreated into the safety of its traditional models, and the Panther was quietly relegated to the dustbin of automotive history. Many of the prototypes were dismantled, destroyed, or hidden away in secrecy, and the rest of the world was left unaware of the car's existence. As the years passed, the 1953 Packard Panther became little more than a footnote in the history of American sports cars. For car enthusiasts and automotive historians, the Panther represents what could have been, a tantalizing glimpse of an alternate history in which Packard rose to prominence as a maker of cutting-edge performance cars. In the end, the Panther became one of the most elusive and forgotten supercars of the 1950s. The car's potential was never realized, and it vanished without a trace from the public eye. In recent years, the few surviving Packard Panthers have become coveted pieces of automotive history. These rare prototypes have been quietly stored away in private collections, their stories known only to a select few. The Panther's stunning design and forward-thinking engineering continue to spark the imaginations of those who understand its place in the broader context of automotive innovation. Had Packard been able to bring the Panther to production, it could have changed. In 1966, the American muscle car wars were intensifying, and Chrysler's Plymouth division was looking to stake its claim. The Ford Mustang had captured the imagination of car buyers everywhere, and its success sparked a flurry of activity in Detroit as home automakers scrambled to develop their own entries into the burgeoning pony car market. Plymouth, eager to capitalize on the trend, had the perfect weapon, a potential powerhouse of a muscle car in the form of a Hemi-powered Barracuda. It was a machine that could have reshaped the competition and delivered a knockout blow to the Mustang. But as quickly as it came together, the project was shut down by corporate decision-makers. The Hemi-powered Barracuda never saw the light of day, and the prototypes were destroyed before anyone outside of Chrysler's inner circle could lay eyes on them. The story of the 1966 Plymouth Barracuda Hemi begins with the growing recognition that the pony car segment was here to stay. With the Mustang leading the charge, Ford had shown that a small, affordable, performance-oriented car could appeal to the masses. Plymouth's Barracuda, which had been around since 1964 as a compact car, was well-positioned to take on the Mustang. However, unlike Ford, who had chosen to build their Mustang around a V8, Plymouth's Barracuda was initially limited by its smaller engines, which did not allow it to compete in the same performance-oriented league. That all changed when Plymouth set their sights on the legendary Hemi engine, Chrysler's ultimate performance power plant. The Hemi 426 cubic inch V8 was an engine designed for serious power, offering outrageous horsepower numbers and unmatched performance on the track. With its ability to produce over 425 horsepower, it was a perfect fit for muscle car enthusiasts looking for raw speed and acceleration. Chrysler had already begun using the Hemi in larger cars like the Charger and the Roadrunner, where it garnered a fierce reputation on the street and the drag strip. It seemed only natural to consider it for the Barracuda, transforming the compact pony car into a performance monster. In 1990, Plymouth began testing a few prototypes with the Hemi engine under the hood. The idea was simple: take the nimble Barracuda, known for its lightweight construction, and combine it with the brute power of the Hemi engine. The result would be a car that could outmuscle the Mustang in both straight-line speed and handling, a true contender in the pony car wars. The early tests showed promise, with the Hemi-powered Barracuda easily outpacing anything Ford had to offer. It was a car that could challenge the Mustang on all fronts, delivering blistering acceleration and a thrilling driving experience. It seemed like Plymouth was on the verge of creating something special, a car that would turn the pony car wars upside down. However, the Hemi Barracuda project faced a significant hurdle: corporate politics. Chrysler, always focused on making the best business decisions, had already positioned the Hemi as the engine for its larger muscle cars. The Charger and the Roadrunner were getting the lion's share of attention, and the management at Chrysler was hesitant to divert the Hemi engine away from these vehicles to put it into a smaller, less profitable pony car. The decision was made to focus the Hemi's future on the larger muscle cars and not on a compact car like the Barracuda. As a result, the Hemi Barracuda prototypes were quietly shut down, and the project was scrapped before it could even come to market. But the story of the Hemi-powered Barracuda did not end there. Chrysler's decision to keep the Hemi 20 out of the Barracuda didn't extinguish the dream entirely. In 1970, the Hemi engine finally made its way into the Barracuda lineup, but by then the world had changed. The muscle car era was on the decline, and the 1970 Hemi Cuda, though legendary, arrived at a time when insurance premiums were skyrocketing and emissions regulations were becoming more stringent. Despite these challenges, the 1970 Hemi Cuda became an icon, but it wasn't the original vision of a Hemi-powered Barracuda from 1966. As for the early prototypes, they were lost to history. Chrysler's engineers, under strict orders from the top brass, destroyed the early test cars to prevent them from becoming a public curiosity. No one outside the company ever got to see them, and over the years, the Hemi-powered Barracuda of 1966 became little more than a myth. The idea of a small, Hemi-powered pony car from Plymouth seemed like a missed opportunity, a lost chapter in the muscle car wars that could have changed the trajectory of the entire segment. Today, the 1966 Plymouth Barracuda Hemi stands as one of the greatest what-if stories in American muscle car history. While the 1970 Hemi Cuda is one of the most sought-after muscle cars of all time, enthusiasts often wonder what could have been if Chrysler had followed through on the original plan. In the late 1980s, the Buick Grand National had already cemented its status as one of the most iconic performance cars of its time. The GNX, in particular, with its turbocharged V6 engine, was an anomaly in the muscle car world. Unlike the brash, loud, and often flashy muscle cars of its era, the GNX was a dark, understated powerhouse that had stealthily earned a reputation for being a street racer's dream. It was a car that didn't scream for attention, but when it roared, it was impossible to ignore. For many, the GNX represented the peak of domestic performance, quietly and ruthlessly efficient. But as impressive as the Grand National was, Buick's engineers weren't content with merely making a fast car. They were aiming higher, pushing the limits of what a turbocharged V6 could achieve. In 1987, they began work on a car that would take the Grand National's performance to unimaginable heights, the GNX Stage 2. The concept behind the GNX Stage 2 was simple yet audacious. Take the already formidable GNX and crank its power to levels that would rival and even surpass the legendary Chevrolet Corvette. Buick's engineers went to work, rethinking the turbo system to create an engine that could push well over 400 horsepower. By all accounts, the GNX Stage 2 wasn't just an incremental improvement, it was a true monster of a machine, one that could shake up the American performance car scene in ways no one had imagined. The new turbo system provided instant torque, while a more refined and efficient engine management system ensured that the car wasn't just fast, it was a work of engineering perfection. The result was a Buick that could reach speeds beyond 200 mph. That's right, faster than the Corvette, a car with a decades-long legacy as the king of American performance. The GNX Stage 2 would have been able to leave Corvettes in its wake, effortlessly lapping racetracks and dominating the street racing scene with its brutal acceleration and raw, untamed power. It was everything enthusiasts dreamed of in a performance car. A car that could outpace the best of the best without anyone even realizing what had passed them by. But as history would show, GM's internal politics would quickly intervene. While the engineers and designers at Buick were eager to show the world what they had built, GM's leadership, particularly at the higher levels of the company, was far more conservative. The idea of a Buick muscle car besting the Corvette, a model that had been the face of American performance for decades, was a direct threat to the established order. GM didn't want the Buick division stealing the Corvette's thunder, especially at a time when the sports car world was beginning to shift its focus toward more refined, sophisticated performance models. There was also another issue lurking in the background: the rapid changes in automotive regulations, especially surrounding emissions and safety standards. With rising insurance costs and more stringent environmental laws, GM knew that unleashing a turbocharged Buick with over 400 horsepower might be more trouble than it was worth. The corporate message was clear: this car was too much of a risk. The project was shut down before it ever had a chance to reach production. In the end, the GNX Stage 2 was quietly erased from GM's history. The prototypes were reportedly dismantled, the development files sealed away, and the car that could have redefined American performance disappeared without a trace. Those who had worked on the project were left with only the knowledge that they had built something truly special, something that could have taken the American performance car industry by storm, but was buried under the weight of corporate fear. Today, the Buick GNX remains an undisputed icon. It's a car that still commands respect, a sleeper that continues to defy expectations. But the GNX Stage 2, the more powerful, more dangerous version of the car, lives on only in whispers and speculation. It's one of those great what-ifs of automotive history, a car that never saw the light of day, but still holds a place in the imaginations of those who know the full story. Imagine for a moment a Buick that was faster than the Corvette. Picture the look on the faces of Corvette owners as a blacked-out, unassuming Grand National pulled ahead of them on the freeway or down the quarter mile. The GNX Stage 2 could have completely shifted the balance of performance in the United States. It could have been the car that dethroned the Corvette, forcing Chevrolet to rethink its entire performance strategy. The truth is, we'll never know what might have been. But the story of the GNX Stage 2 remains a testament to what happens when ambition meets corporate resistance. It's a reminder that sometimes the best cars are the ones that never make it past the prototype stage. The cars that could have changed everything but instead are left to fade into the realm of automotive mythology. In the mid-1950s, Ford was on a roll, riding the wave of post-war optimism and innovation. The Thunderbird had quickly become a symbol of American style and performance, offering a perfect blend of luxury and speed. Initially conceived as a personal luxury car, it quickly evolved into a more powerful, more performance-oriented machine, thanks in part to the growing interest in muscle cars and sports sedans. By 1956, Ford had designed what could have been the ultimate performance Thunderbird, a factory-supercharged version that promised speeds and thrills few could imagine. The 1956 Ford Thunderbird Supercharged, powered by a Paxton supercharger, was a true marvel of engineering. The small V8 engine that had already impressed buyers with its reliability and smoothness now had a supercharger strapped to it, cranking out power like few cars of its era. The supercharger not only boosted the Thunderbird's performance, but also gave it an aggressive growl, turning it from a smooth cruiser into a true muscle car. With the added boost, the Thunderbird could reach speeds that would put it on par with some of the best performance cars of its time, even by today's standards. It was a car designed to soar, but the powers that be at Ford weren't so sure it should. Ford had built a handful of prototypes to test the supercharged Thunderbird's performance, and early reports from drivers were glowing. The car was faster than anything else in its class, and it handled the extra power with ease. It was a stunning combination of style and speed, something that could have redefined the Thunderbird as more than just a luxury car. With the added supercharger, it was no longer just a good-looking roadster. It became a true performance machine, capable of rivaling some of the fastest cars on the road. However, Ford quickly realized that such a powerful car might not be in their best interest. There was a growing concern that the average Thunderbird buyer, a consumer base typically looking for style and comfort rather than raw power, might not be ready for the type of performance the supercharged version could deliver. In addition, there were concerns about the long-term durability of the supercharger on a car intended for everyday driving, as well as the potential impact it could have on the car's reliability. Even in the 1950s, American car companies were still wary of putting too much power in the hands of the average consumer, fearing it might be too much for some drivers to handle. As a result, Ford made the decision to quietly abandon the supercharged Thunderbird project. The prototypes were shelved, and the cars, once destined for production, disappeared from the public eye. For years, the supercharged Thunderbird was a secret, a car that almost made it into the hands of performance enthusiasts, but was pulled back at the last minute. Even today, there is little concrete evidence of the car's existence beyond the handful of prototypes that were built. The Ford Thunderbird Supercharged remains one of the great what-ifs of automotive history. What if Ford had gone ahead with the supercharged version? Would the Thunderbird have been remembered as a true performance icon, alongside other American muscle cars of the time? Would it have sparked a new generation of performance luxury cars? These are questions that will never be answered, as the project was quietly killed and the prototypes were hidden away, lost to history. But the story of the supercharged Thunderbird is not just about what could have been. It's also a testament to the cautiousness that characterized American automotive culture during the 1950s. Ford, like many other manufacturers of the time, wasn't ready to fully embrace the world of high-performance cars. It was an era when the balance between luxury and performance was still being tested, and while cars like the Corvette had begun to push the envelope, Ford was hesitant to go too far. The supercharged Thunderbird represented a glimpse into what could have been a more powerful and thrilling chapter in the Thunderbird's legacy, but ultimately, it was a vision that remained unrealized. Today, the story of the 1956 Ford Thunderbird Supercharged serves as a reminder of what might have been. A car that almost flew too high, but was grounded before it could spread its wings. It remains one of the many lost legends of the American muscle car era, a tantalizing what-if that car enthusiasts can only dream about. If only Ford had taken the leap, perhaps the Thunderbird would have been remembered not just as a luxury car, but as a true American performance legend. In the early 1970s, as the American muscle car wars raged on, one automaker was quietly experimenting with a monster of its own, AMC. Known more for its conservative designs and budget-friendly vehicles, American Motors Corporation, AMC, wasn't a company typically associated with raw, unrestrained performance. But in 1973, they set their sights on the muscle car market in a way that no one saw coming. The Javelin AMX, AMC's answer to the big players like the Mustang and Camaro, was about to become something much more formidable. The 1973 AMC Javelin AMX 401 Supercharged was born to be a game changer, a muscle car that could stand toe-to-toe with the best. But just as it was poised to take the world by storm, it was quietly crushed, fading into obscurity. The Javelin AMX had already earned a reputation as a strong contender in the pony car wars. With its sleek, aggressive design and V8-powered performance, it had what it took to compete with the likes of the Ford Mustang, Chevrolet Camaro, and Dodge Challenger. But AMC wasn't content with just building a good muscle car. They wanted to build the ultimate muscle car. So they took the Javelin AMX and started working on something special, a supercharged version that would blow the competition out of the water. The 401 cubic inch V8 engine, already a powerhouse in its own right, was given an even more serious edge with the addition of a factory blower, a supercharger that would significantly boost the engine's power output. The result was a muscle car that could easily outrun anything in its class. With the added boost from the supercharger, the Javelin AMX 401 Supercharged was pushing over 400 horsepower, enough to send it into serious performance territory. In a straight line, it was a monster that could outrun the vaunted Mustang Mach 1, and its acceleration was nothing short of jaw-dropping. The car was not just a powerhouse, it was a finely tuned machine, engineered for maximum performance. The supercharged Javelin AMX 401 had aggressive suspension tweaks, improved braking systems, and a more refined chassis that allowed it to handle the added power with ease. It was a muscle car that could carve through the corners just as comfortably as it could tear up the drag strip. It was everything AMC needed to show the world that they could compete with the heavy hitters of the muscle car era. However, despite the Javelin AMX 401 Supercharged's incredible potential, the project was shut down just before it could be unveiled. AMC executives, while impressed by the car's performance, feared that it wouldn't sell well enough to justify its production. The muscle car market was already beginning to face significant challenges. Gasoline prices were climbing, insurance rates were rising, and the market was becoming more cautious. AMC, which had always been the underdog in the muscle car game, wasn't sure it could take on the competition and come out on top. With limited production capabilities and a focus on more economical models, the company decided to cancel the project altogether. The prototypes of the supercharged Javelin AMX were either dismantled or hidden away, and the car faded into obscurity. What could have been one of the most powerful and exciting muscle cars of the 1970s was instead crushed under the weight of corporate hesitation. AMC's decision to pull the plug on the Javelin AMX 401 Supercharged was a missed opportunity, a decision that left a void in the muscle car world and relegated the car to the realm of automotive what-ifs. Today, the 1973 AMC Javelin AMX 401 Supercharged remains one of the forgotten legends of the muscle car era. Its supercharged V8 engine, aggressive styling, and thrilling performance are the stuff of automotive enthusiasts' dreams. But because of corporate fear and financial uncertainty, it never made it into the hands of the public. Only a few prototypes remain, and their fate is a mystery to this day. Some claim that a handful of surviving cars were hidden away in private collections, but there's no concrete evidence to confirm their existence. What could have been? Had AMC pushed forward with the Javelin AMX 401 Supercharged, it might have reshaped the landscape of American muscle cars, offering a unique alternative to the big-name players. It could have become a symbol of performance for the underdog brand. But instead, it remains a lost opportunity, a car that was too powerful for its time, but never had a chance to shine. The supercharged Javelin AMX serves as a reminder of what happens when a car company lets a performance monster slip through its fingers. It's a legend that never was, but in the hearts of muscle car aficionados, it's a piece of history that's never forgotten. In the 1990s, when Ford was still riding the success of the Fox body Mustangs and starting to transition into the more refined SN95 platform, a performance legend was quietly brewing in the form of the 1998 Saleen S351 Supercharged. Unlike anything Ford was offering at the time, the S351 was a full-throttle performance Mustang with a heart-stopping 500-plus horsepower, a beastly 5.8L V8, and an aggressive look that screamed power. Built by the legendary Saleen, a name that had already made a reputation for pushing the limits of the Mustang platform, the S351 was everything Ford enthusiasts dreamed of, a factory-backed, no-holds-barred muscle car. But despite its raw power and undeniable appeal, the S351 would never fully see the light of day, a victim of corporate fear and regulations. Saleen, known for its custom-built, performance-enhanced Mustangs, was tasked with creating a new kind of pony car, one that could dominate the streets and stand out among the sea of Mustang GTs and Cobra models. The result was the S351, a car that was anything but ordinary. The 5.8L V8 engine, equipped with a supercharger, was capable of producing an astonishing 500-plus horsepower, far more than Ford's production offerings at the time. In a decade where muscle cars were making a serious comeback, the S351 stood out as an unapologetic performance machine with acceleration, handling, and top-end speed that would leave most competitors in the dust. The S351 wasn't just about raw power either. Saleen made sure the car was a complete package. It featured a custom body kit with aggressive styling elements like a wide body, deeper front and rear fascias, and custom wheels that gave it a menacing stance. The car's suspension was race-tuned, and it was designed to handle just as well as it accelerated, delivering a truly thrilling driving experience. Inside, it had the signature Saleen touches, sports seats, a custom steering wheel, and performance-oriented interior trim. It was a true muscle car in every sense of the word, a machine built for enthusiasts who wanted not only power, but also precision and style. Despite being built to be a high-performance Mustang, the S351 was very much a factory-backed project. It wasn't some aftermarket creation. This was a car that was developed in partnership with Ford and approved by the company. However, as with many high-performance projects, the realities of corporate concerns quickly set in. Ford, wary of potential warranty issues, the car's ability to meet stringent emissions regulations, and concerns over the practicality of a car with over 500 horsepower, chose to pull the plug on the S351. The model was simply too extreme for Ford to commit to in the long term, especially as the company was trying to balance performance with growing concerns about environmental laws and customer safety. While the car was officially listed as a Saleen Mustang, Ford's corporate hesitation meant that very few ever made it to customers. Saleen, with its smaller production capacity, could only build a limited number of S351s, rumored to be fewer than 100 units were ever produced. These cars, prized by those who had the privilege of owning one, were a rare breed. Most of the cars that were produced were quickly snapped up by collectors, while the rest of the cars, as with many high-performance projects that don't see full production, disappeared into the shadows of history. What could have been a new chapter in Mustang history was quietly erased, leaving the 1998 Saleen S351 supercharged as a forgotten legend. It was the car that Ford didn't want to produce, despite its obvious performance capabilities. But for the few who got to experience it, the S351 was a glimpse into what could have been, an unrelenting powerhouse that could have redefined the Mustang's image for the modern era. Today, the surviving S351s are considered some of the most sought-after performance Mustangs, with their rarity and overwhelming power making them a true collector's dream. The story of the 1998 Saleen S351 is one of untapped potential, of a car that was too bold for its time. But in the hearts of Mustang fans, it remains one of the greatest what-could-have-been stories in American automotive history. It's a testament to the high-performance vehicles that almost made it into the mainstream, but were squashed before they could truly shine.